video.
It's the 4th of July, the birth of our nation, the day in which we celebrate our independence. I think of cookouts, fireworks, heat. God, I love air conditioning. But I also think of summer movies. And when it comes to summer movies, the granddaddy of them all is Jaws. But I don't want to talk about Jaws, the masterpiece, the phenomena, the very first summer blockbuster, the game changer that it was. I discussed the movie and reviewed the new 50th anniversary limited edition steelbook a couple of weeks ago. Go check that video out. Today, I want to talk about its sequels.
A what?
Sure, they're nowhere on the same level as the original, and admittedly, they go downhill with remarkable speed. From the highs of Jaws to the lows of Jaws the Revenge. That's got to be a record speed run. But I love them nonetheless, and to me, they're just as much summer movies as their granddaddy. So let's get this started with
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
Jaws 2 had big fins to fill, and critics were ready from the time it was announced to thoroughly chew it up and spit it out upon release. Jaws 2, like its predecessor, was not an easy production. The controversies began straight out the gate. The film's original director, John D. Hancock, was fired only a couple of weeks into production. Hancock had been hired to direct Jaws 2 after producer Richard Zanuck was impressed with his previous film, Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Jessica is a solid thriller. I've reviewed it in the past. Go check that video out. But going from small indie thriller to helming the sequel to one of the highest grossing and most critically acclaimed movies of all time? What was that Queen David Bowie collab called again?
Under pressure.
On a side note, the original concept for Jaws 2 was a prequel starring a young Quint and chronicling the last voyage of the USS Indianapolis. Universal considered this briefly, then decided to go a more conventional route for the sequel. Hancock, while admitting that he was under tremendous pressure to deliver, tells a different story, claiming that one of the heroes from the first movie became his saboteur on the sequel. Verna Fields was the Oscar-winning editor of Jaws, and in many eyes, including director Steven Spielberg's, the film's savior. By the time Jaws 2 came around, she had been promoted to studio exec, and she wanted to call the shots on Jaws 2. However, there's a stipulation in the Directors Guild stating that studio execs can't direct movies the same studio is producing. Fields had the ear of Universal president Sid Sheinberg, and according to Hancock, she took every opportunity to cut his legs out from under him. And the fact that Hancock rejected Sheinberg's suggestion to increase Lorraine Gary's presence in the film didn't help matters either. Lorraine Gary just happened to be Sid Sheinberg's wife. In fact, it's rumored that Fields truly called the shots on Jaws 2, even after Hancock's replacement Juno Schwark, who Fields reportedly recommended, was brought in. It wasn't smooth sailing from then on either. Roy Scheider was not eager to reprise his role as Chief Brody for the sequel, but was contractually obligated to do so. He made it known early and often that he did not want to be there. There are reports of Scheider having multiple blow-ups with Schwark, with one such incident leading to a physical altercation in which Scheider punched him in the face. In a desperate attempt to either be fired or committed, Scheider trashed a Beverly Hills hotel room, claiming that he'd gone insane. You know, I've heard of people going to great lengths in order to get out of work, but that takes it. Ultimately, to appease Scheider, Universal let him out of his 3-picture deal, counting Jaws 2 as 2 movies. Oddly enough, I don't think any of this drama impacted Scheider's performance, although there are large stretches of the movie in which Chief Brody is MIA. And much like the first film, Jaws 2 went over schedule. There were issues with the mechanical shark, and the production had to be moved to Florida from Martha's Vineyard because shooting had stretched into the fall and winter months. By the way, I did a Bloodstream with Keith Gordon, who played Doug Fetterman a couple of years ago, and one of the topics we covered was Jaws 2. He shed a lot of light on what John Hancock's film could have been, a couple of hair-raising moments in which the mechanical shark took on a life of its own, and much more. Definitely check that out. As with most sequels, Jaws 2 treads a lot of the same water as the first movie. Despite Brody being the island savior just a few short years ago, the town officials shrug off his warnings that another shark has chosen Amity as its own personal buffet and refuse to close the beach. Jaws 2 quickly eschews the nuance and subtlety of the first movie and turns our boy Bruce, or Brucette if you've read the novelization, into a killing machine. That's right, Jaws 2 is practically a slasher movie, right down to the cool scar the shark gets on the side of its head. In the novelization of Jaws 2, it's revealed that the shark is a female, and she's pregnant, which would account for her ravenous appetite. On a side note, sharks give live birth to their young, and while the pups are developing in the womb, the first to fully develop will instinctively hunt and eat its smaller siblings. This is nature's way of ensuring that when the young shark is born, it's an adept enough hunter to survive on its own in the wild. Personally, I love Jaws 2. There's something dark and nihilistic about it. In fact, to avoid an R rating, Schwark was asked to decrease the body count and lighten up the overall tone, adding more focus to the adventure elements that worked so well in the first film. There's more of a sense of urgency in Jaws 2. The pacing is quicker, there's more attacks, there's big explosions, the shark even eats a friggin' helicopter. Well, not really, but close. This is one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. A helicopter from the Harbor Patrol lands on the ocean in an attempt to rescue the marooned teens. There's a sense of relief in that rescue has finally arrived, but also tension because you know the shark's around. And then, just as the helicopter is beginning to ascend, the shot of the shark not leaping out of the water, but already up out of the water, jaws agape. Oh, it's beautiful. I would love to have seen that on the big screen. I can imagine audiences jumping out of their seats when that happened. And the poor pilot. I'm sure the last thing that went through his mind before either drowning or being eaten by the shark was that beard. That dude had one of the all-time greatest beards in cinema history. There are so many awesome shots of the shark showing off the enormity of the beast. The shark here just feels more dangerous too, more sinister. And when the shark eats that poor girl who saves young Sean Brody but then can't pull herself up onto the hull of the boat to safety, right in front of Sean while he screams in wide-eyed horror, and then is pretty much comatose for the rest of the movie. You know, Sean, if you hadn't framed your big brother into letting you tag along, she'd probably still be alive to this day. Most likely enjoying her golden years with her grandkids right now. But no, you just had to tag along, didn't you? Little jerk. And though there are people that will argue that Jaws is not a horror movie, Jaws 2 is without question a horror movie. There was no doubt that Jaws 2 would be a massive success at the box office. Its marketing campaign was brilliant. The "just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water" tagline is iconic, and I adore the poster art. The subtlety of the teaser poster with a lone fin breaking the ocean surface during a blood-red dawn, or the classic image of the shark poised and ready to feast upon the gleefully unaware water skier. This is actually the only time where the artwork for the shark is different on the promotional material. Parts 3 and 4 just recycled the same image of the shark from the original poster. Here the shark looks more monstrous, a leviathan rising up from the deep to devour us all. Critics harpooned the sequel, but audiences showed up in droves. It didn't surpass the box office take of the first, but it was Universal's biggest hit of 1978, taking in over $208 million worldwide, and becoming the highest-grossing sequel ever, until it was unseated the following year by Rocky II. Overall, Jaws 2 is a worthy sequel, and a damn fine movie in its own right. I can't say the same for Jaws 3. I'm sorry, Jaws 3 in 3D. The year was 1983, and for some reason, 3D had made a comeback. And for some reason, there were all these Part 3s being made in 3D in 1983. How did that not signal the end times? You had Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, Amityville 3 in 3D, and of course, Jaws 3 in 3D. This time directing duties went to Jaws production designer Joe Alves, and the decision was made to move the action from Amity Island to SeaWorld. It was an inspired choice. The idea of Jaws going after patrons of the theme park sounds really cool. However, the execution was lacking, to say the least. Things did get off to a promising start when acclaimed author Richard Matheson was hired to pen the script. Matheson's original script focused on a great white swimming upstream and becoming trapped in a lake. It almost sounds like the incident in New Jersey in 1916 that inspired Peter Benchley to write the novel, Jaws. However, according to Matheson, the studio didn't jibe with his idea, and after many revisions, it was decided that the shark would become trapped not in a lake, but in SeaWorld. On a side note, Richard Zanuck and David Brown had initially pitched Jaws 3 as a spoof, entitled Jaws 3 People Zero, and would be produced as part of the National Lampoon. They wanted Joe Dante to direct, and the movie would have reportedly opened with the scene of author Peter Benchley playing himself being eaten by a great white while swimming in his pool. Steven Spielberg threatened to walk from his deal at Universal if the movie happened, which is why it didn't happen. Jaws 3 is a boring movie. There, I said it. It's a boring movie with poor pacing, no sense of urgency, and just an overall vanilla tone. The first half of the movie finds Mike Brody, played by Dennis Quaid, and Dr. Catherine Morgan, played by Bess Armstrong, locating and capturing a young great white that somehow became trapped inside the park. They then try to make the shark an attraction, but anyone who knows anything about white sharks knows that they don't take well to captivity. You take the sea's apex predator, whose entire existence is roaming the open ocean for either prey or a partner, and take all that away by dumping it in a tank. They just lose the will to live. They stop eating and eventually die. And this could have been an angle the movie explored to provide some depth and to give the characters something else to do. SeaWorld, after all, is highly criticized for their treatment of marine mammals. But no, let's just keep boring everyone to tears. Jaws 3 does sport a pretty solid cast. The aforementioned Dennis Quaid and Bess Armstrong, Louis Gossett Jr., Leah Thompson in her big screen debut, and Simon McCorkindale. However, the movie pretty much wastes all of them. In fact, the filming of Jaws 3 was so miserable an experience for Dennis Quaid that the only way he could get through it was with the aid of a lot of cocaine. As a matter of fact, in an interview, Quaid was quoted as saying that there's not a single frame of him in the movie in which he's not completely coked up. Hey, I mean, some people rely on coffee to get them through a rough day. Others need massive quantities of blow. Who's to judge? Of course, if there's a baby shark in the park, what are the odds that its much larger mother is also inside the park? Pretty good. Mama Jaws shows up, and naturally, she's not happy. The rest writes itself. But even when Mama Jaws shows up, it's not like the movie picks up all that much. Not having the shark go after the group of people trapped down in the underwater tunnels is a huge missed opportunity. Imagine the shark actually going into the tunnels and stalking the people inside. They're running out of oxygen, and the shark is slamming against the steel doors, letting in more and more water with every blow. If they don't asphyxiate, they'll drown. And if they don't drown, the shark will eat them. But no, that would be too exciting for this movie. Jaws 3's only real claim to fame is that it was filmed in 3D, and very poorly, I might add. According to director Joe Alves, he was forced by the studio to add more 3D gags than he'd initially planned, and due to how the 3D gags were filmed, not seeing the movie in actual 3D reveals that much of the movie is fuzzy in appearance and with blurred edges. The scaling on some shots are just way off also. Take a look at the closing image of the film. What the hell is that? And I have to be honest, these flaws kind of gave Jaws 3 a kind of charm when I was a kid. Now they're just fodder for being goofed on. I highly doubt seeing the film in 3D would do much to bolster it anyway. The classic image of a frozen stiff shark gliding slowly and totally motionless toward the large window in the control room, for instance, in no dimension known or unknown to man, would that look good? Despite awful reviews, Jaws 3 still did well at the box office, grossing $88 million worldwide. It was a far cry from the success of Part 2, but still turned a sizable profit. It was also nominated for 5 Golden Raspberry Awards. I know I've crapped all over Jaws here, and admittedly it is my least favorite Jaws movie, but I still have a soft spot for it. Despite the fact that the studio rejected Jaws 3 being a spoof, it still somehow happened. The fact that the movie isn't in on the joke, though, just makes it more fun. It's not so bad it's good, it's just bad. In a kinda good way. Now when it comes to so bad it's good, Jaws the Revenge wasn't born out of Universal receiving an inspired pitch or because the producers were passionate about making a 4th installment. Jaws the Revenge was born out of necessity. Universal needed a hit. They needed a hit more than Dennis Quaid needed a hit on the set of Jaws 3. So what IP did Universal already own that had proven to be a consistent box office draw in the past? This time it's personal. Jaws the Revenge was fast-tracked with a script that seemingly hadn't received a second draft. Hell, it may have only been an outline. Directing duties this time around were handed to Joseph Sargent. Sargent enjoyed a lengthy career dating all the way back to the 1950s. One of his most notable directing efforts was the critically acclaimed The Taking of Pelham 123, starring Quint himself, Robert Shaw. What drew Sargent to the project? Was it the strength of the script? No. Was he determined to make Jaws 4 the best Jaws movie since the first one? Heck no. 3 months of shooting on location in the Bahamas? Count me in. Universal CEO Sid Sheinberg's only mandate to Sargent was to make it quick. This was September of 1986, and Jaws was already slated for release the following summer. And we all know that when movies begin with the release date instead of a solid script, only great things can happen. Oh Lord, where to begin with this one? Why not the truth? Jaws 4 is an unmitigated disaster of a movie. It is jaw-droppingly dumb. It is mind-numbingly inept in every way possible. The fact that Universal execs watched the finished film and didn't decide to indefinitely shelve it is testament to just how hard up they were for money. And yet, I love Jaws the Revenge with all my heart. Right out the gate, Jaws the Revenge asks the audience to buy into the fact that sharks can harbor a personal vendetta. I can't even say it with a straight face. And that this particular shark has a huge chip on its fin for the Brody family. So big a chip, in fact, that it travels from Amity Island after eating Sean Brody. It's actually a pretty effective scene in which a group of people near the water can't hear his blood-curdling screams as he's being eaten alive by the shark because they're singing Christmas carols. Anyway, after feasting on the youngest Brody, it's then on its way to the Bahamas to exact revenge on the remaining Brody family. Mike Brody, this time played by Halloween 2 and The Last Starfighter's Lance Guest, encourages his grieving mother Ellen, played again by Lorraine Gary, to come stay with him down in the Bahamas after Sean, or what's left of him, is laid to rest. And the shark follows her, swimming thousands of miles over the course of just a couple of days. It somehow knows that she's relocated, and it somehow knows exactly where she's relocated. Now, in the novelization for Jaws the Revenge, written by Hank Searles, who wrote the novelization for Jaws 2, based on an early draft of Michael de Guzman's screenplay, we learn that there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this. The shark is under the thrall of a voodoo priest in the Bahamas who has beef with Mike Brody. Like I said, perfectly reasonable. Why the shark didn't just come straight to the Bahamas and take out Mike instead of starting with his brother, I don't know. How did the voodoo priest named Papa Jacques even know that Mike had a mother and brother and where they were located? Who knows? Hey, it's voodoo, man. By the way, this is an absolutely fascinating read that includes so much stuff that didn't make its way into the movie. Hoagie is a drug runner. Ellen is involved with some mafioso in the Bahamas. Why are they always trying to shoehorn the mob into these things? And at one point, Papa Jacques puts a spell on Mike's young daughter, Thea, causing her to wander zombie-like in the middle of the night toward the ocean, where the shark is waiting to gobble her up. There are even scenes from the shark's perspective, in which the shark is confused because it has no idea why it's doing what it's doing. And insanely enough, the revenge in Jaws the Revenge makes more sense in that it's Papa Jacques' revenge on the Brody family, and that the shark is just a pawn, another victim really, than to believe that a shark with a brain the size of a Cheeto with antennae suddenly becomes sentient and goes on a vengeance-fueled rampage spanning thousands of miles of open ocean and 2 countries. Man, that got deep. The cast is solid, and the performances aren't bad, with the exception of Mario Van Peebles' turn as Jake. Van Peebles is a good actor, but his portrayal of Jake is just too much. Jake isn't a character so much as he's a walking stereotype of a Jamaican person. Van Peebles' Jamaican accent comes and goes throughout the movie, and he was reportedly given free rein to rewrite all of Jake's dialogue. And the more dialogue he has, the less likable he is. The most surprising casting in Jaws the Revenge is Oscar winner Michael Caine as Hoagie. In fact, Michael Caine couldn't attend the Oscar ceremony to receive his Best Supporting Actor award for Hannah and Her Sisters because he was busy filming Jaws the Revenge. Caine later stated in an interview that he's never seen the movie, but he's seen the house that the movie bought, and that it's quite nice. When it comes to the mechanical sharks used in the movie, my goodness, it looks drunk. The shark swims cockeyed with its mouth wide open the entire time. It's easily the most fake-looking shark in the entire series, and in some scenes, especially when the movie's presented on television in full-frame format, you can actually see the machinery that the shark's attached to. Also, and despite the fact that sharks don't have vocal cords, the shark here roars. it roars a lot. Now, there are some effective scenes in Jaws the Revenge, one in which the shark stalks Michael inside of a shipwreck, and the scene in which the shark attacks a group of people on a banana boat, dragging one passenger to a watery grave in its jaws, is pretty cool. Depending on which version of the film you see, there are 3 different endings to Jaws the Revenge, and all of them are absolutely ridiculous. In one, the shark propels itself out of the water perfectly vertical to the boat Ellen is helming, and she uses the ship's broken bow to impel the shark. In one version, the shark just explodes, and the ending of Jaws 1, in which a headless Bruce sinks to the ocean floor, is edited in. In another version, the entire front end of the boat breaks off with the bow in the shark, and we see the shark in the broken off part of the boat sinking to the ocean floor. In the international version, the shark just simply explodes upon impact with the bow. However, when you pause or put that sequence in slow motion, which I did, often you'll see a very poorly and crudely designed miniature of the shark, and the whole thing looks like it was filmed in a bathtub or possibly even in somebody's kitchen sink. I mean, look at this thing, for God's sake. And somehow this made its way into a potential summer blockbuster produced by one of the industry's oldest and most storied studios. In one version of the ending, they actually edit in scenes from the end of the first Jaws movie with the classic Chief Brody line, "Smile, you son of a," you know. And they're presented as if Ellen is having flashbacks to this scene from the first movie, even though she wasn't present during this scene in the first movie. Jaws the Revenge, unlike its predecessors, was a huge flop, raking in a mere $51 million at the worldwide box office on a budget of $23 million. The movie was nominated for 7 Golden Raspberry Awards, including a nomination going to Bruce the Shark for Worst Actor. And so endeth the Jaws series. Is Jaws the Revenge worthy of its status as a bad movie, ridiculed and mocked by people the world over? Abso-freaking-lutely. But as a connoisseur of bad movies, I freaking love it. Even as a kid with admittedly low standards back then, I reveled in and was endlessly fascinated by just how bad the movie was. And to this day, it's a movie that I find myself watching whenever I catch it on TV, or occasionally I'll pull the Blu-ray off the shelf. And regardless of how many times I've seen it, I'm still in awe and endlessly amused by just how bad it is. Of course, Jaws and its sequels have lived on through a plethora of physical releases and an endless assortment of merchandise. Deservedly, the sequels are overshadowed by the original, but the fact that oftentimes they're just outright ignored, relegated to black sheep status, quite frankly pisses me off. Oh, and Dennis Quaid, if you see this, call me. So there you go, the Jaws sequels. I love them all, to varying degrees, but still. I hope everyone out there has a safe and happy 4th of July. Please let me know what your plans are for Independence Day, and let me know how you rank the Jaws sequels down in the comments section below. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up and share it on social media. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and until next time, peace. A huge thank you to all my patrons and channel members for your generosity and support. Become a patron today and get early access to videos, have a say in what content appears on my channel, join me for monthly live streams, exclusive watch parties, and more. Become a channel member today and get access to exclusive badges and emotes to use when I stream, as well as members-only watch parties. Both those links are in the description. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.